So each month we look at a theme, a topic, a framework, or a concept from one of those four pillars of scaling up: the strategy, people, execution, and cash. Last month we looked at essentially addressing the question that we all have really about our team members every now and then, is would we enthusiastically rehire everyone in our team? And we looked at a particular template to help us to think about starting to do that we call the job scorecard, and it was a really simple way then of being able to answer that question, but also to set key accountabilities with team members. And we talked about an acronym called BOARD around behavior, ability, understanding, and desire as the four key things that we want every individual to have and display within their roles. But this month it's about growth. We're looking at it from the strategy pillar more than anything else, and it's about how and why we need to identify opportunities for growth. So where are those best opportunities? So why grow at all is the first question. Does size matter, and is growth important? And we've all seen various quotes around along these lines of if business doesn't grow, it dies. There's lots of different people have said things like that, and certainly I wouldn't disagree with that. The basic idea is that if we stand still, our competitors won't. So essentially we're going backwards, and that's absolutely right. But there's something else that's really important within the idea of growth in particular, and that's about the value of our business. If we're trying to create a business that has value, and maybe we're looking for investment at some point, or we're looking perhaps to maybe even to exit from the business at some point, then growth is a really important aspect of that, both in terms of historical growth as to what we can demonstrate that we've achieved, so that we can show a good consistent growth in both the top line but also in the profits of the business, but also that we can demonstrate that there are future opportunities for the business to continue to grow. So size, growth is really important from all sorts of aspects, including the value. So what we're going to do now is have a quick look. I'm going to walk you through something called the Ansoff Matrix. And you may have come across this before, because it is certainly not new. It's developed by mathematician Igor Ansoff in 1959 and published in the Harvard Business Review. So it's not new, but it is a fundamental stalwart framework of all business planning, and it's used around the world, because what it helps to do a number of things. One is brainstorming all sorts of ideas for growth, where it's going to come from, but it also helps us to assess them in a broad way around the likelihood of success, or equally the risk of failure. There's an element of risk that comes within this, and if you look at the matrix here, essentially four boxes. The axis on the left hand side is around markets or customer groups. So at the bottom it's existing customer groups, and then we move up to going into new groups, and across the bottom it's existing products and services, and then we go to the next box of new product and services. So we end up with four boxes, the bottom left of which is essentially existing products and services and existing markets or existing customer groups, which is essentially market penetration. And then the other box is, so if we're going into new markets, there's obviously market development or customer acquisition. If we went along to the bottom right, that's around product development, new products and services. And the top right hand box is a complete diversification. And if we look at it from the point of view of risk, then we could color code those boxes, because essentially the lowest risk of failure is the market penetration aspect, because we're dealing with the kind of customers that we already know, and we're dealing with the products and services that we already know. So there's nothing new there. It's about how can we penetrate further and do more business in our existing space, essentially. So that should be the low-hanging fruit. And in a way, we don't really need to move from there unless we think that we are struggling to continue with that market penetration. If we went up to the top, or then across to the right, then we're bringing in an element of risk, either a new type of customer group or a new product or service that we're doing. And of course, the top right-hand box is the most risky of all, and we better make really sure that we've done our research before we start to think about going into that. So that's a quick look at the Ansoff Matrix, but maybe to bring it back to home and look at a really simple business idea. So, my brother and I, when we were young, we had a few apple trees in the garden, and we decided that we would make a bit of extra pocket money by selling apples on the front driveway. if we look at that bottom right hand box, you know, how could we do more business with our existing neighbors? We might ask ourselves questions like, can we increase the average sale? So can we do bulk orders, sell crates of apples to neighbors instead of just 1 or 2 apples at a time? So what could we do to encourage that? What could we do to increase the frequency of purchase? You know, could we encourage them to come back and come back on a repeat purchase idea? Can we encourage more people to come down the road in the first place? And maybe we need to put a sign at the end of the lane and direct them down. And also, how can we make them stop at our house? So we might think of all sorts of ideas around that. And if we're really successful, you know, what happens if we need more apples? You know, do we run out of apples? So there's a lot that we could do just in that market penetration box, if you like, doing more business with our neighbors. But we could then also think about, okay, well, where else could we go? We could take our apples in crates maybe to a fete, maybe a garden fete somewhere, and we could set up a stall. So we'd be taking our existing products and services, in this case our apples, to a new customer group. There's an element of risk there. You know, we don't know whether anybody's going to turn up. We don't know whether we need a license or what we might need to do, but we could research that and we could do that. So you might like to think in your business about the different kind of customer groups that maybe you could deal with. And it doesn't have to just be geographical. It could be based around age or sex. It could be different psychographic segments such as personality traits or values or interests or lifestyles. For example, maybe people who play tennis and reaching them at the tennis club or something like that. So there's all sorts of different ways of segmenting your market and looking for new customer groups. So that's the top left hand box. But if we then go back and we think about, oh, what about the top bottom right hand box? That's the one where we stay with our existing customers. So we stay at home in our example, off our driveway, and we want to then think about what other things could we do. So we could be selling fruit and veg. So instead of just apples, we could have some veg in there, or we might even want to start selling cider, make cider out of the apples, or apple juice, or jams, or anything like that. Now, of course, they're all great things that we could do, and we know our customers, we know our neighbors, but there's an element of unknown in there. You know, especially if we're producing something and we're having to then make the jam or make the cider, then we've got to make sure that we know what we're doing with that, and there's therefore another element of risk. So there's some simple ideas or ways of thinking about our Apple store. And then last of all, we might think, actually, you know what, maybe further in the future, what we want to do is diversify into having a unit maybe on the high street and having a juice bar or something like that. So that would be a diversification. It's not completely divorced from what we were doing, but it is essentially, compared with just selling apples on our driveway, it's a new customer group, totally new things that we've got to consider about the unit and the location, all of those things, as well as the fact that we're now a juice bar, which is a different service from the one that we're doing now. So that is a quick walkthrough and a quick illustration of how to potentially apply the Ansoff Matrix to a really simple business. In your business, the ways that you can start think about doing this, as well as having a general brainstorm session with your teams, which is fantastic, is that you can start by thinking about making up a list of 5 existing products or services that you're currently offering that you could sell more of by focusing extra energy on your existing customers. So with your key products and services, top 5, if you were to really focus on them, what could you, how much more could you sell if you focused on existing customers? And also, therefore, what sort of activities might you need to think about doing to achieve that? If you then make a separate list of up to 5 new markets or customer groups that you could potentially enter with your existing sets of products and services, and remember that markets doesn't just mean geographical, it could well mean psychographic, demographic, and all the other great ways of segmenting your target market, your customer groups. So make that list of up to 5 new markets that you could enter with your existing products or services. And then lastly, think about 5 new products or services that you don't currently offer that you could offer, and then make sure you identify whether that would be to existing customer groups, types of customers, or whether you're looking at breaching into new customer groups. Of course, that would then tell you whether it's in the bottom right-hand box or the top right-hand box. So there's a simple way of looking at the Ansoff Matrix and starting to make it practical to what you can do in terms of identifying opportunities for growth. So now we understand a little bit more about why growth and a little bit of size perhaps matters, and we've looked at a simple framework, an age-old framework called the Ansoff Matrix, which is really useful. What we're going to look at now is something that Louise has been developing within Bismarck, and this is a really nice tool. We've researched it now with a number of clients that helps you take the Ansoff Matrix and make it even more applicable and brings it a little bit closer to the tactical level, and something that you can really implement within your business. And it's another one of those examples. We talk a lot about trying to bridge the gap between strategy and tactics, and this is a nice way of taking the Ansoff Matrix, which often is a little bit more strategic, and then making it much more tactical. So I'm going to hand over to Louise now to take us through the DREAM acronym.
Thank you, Kevin. So if you could just move it on, that's perfect. So as Kevin said, this is, from something that's been around for over 50 years to something that's absolutely brand new and something we've been working on and developing. Just to, in the interest of, we like to have tools that are simple to operate, but actually that really have some kind of an impact. And we've got some really fantastic feedback from the clients we've been trialing this with. So here we are, where we're sort of launching it on the world. So the DREAM acronym, this is about understanding both your existing customer base and the customer base you would like it to be. So we're starting by looking at actually stratifying our existing customers and actually identifying where new customers are. And then we're going to take it a step further by turning it into a really good forecasting tool. Because quite often what happens is, we just identify people and then we go off and we do various things. It's really important to understand it and use it for forecasting and also for measurement. So what do we do here? What is this all about? A DREAM acronym essentially stands for ditch, re-engage, expand, acquire, maintain. And those are the sort of 5 key elements in any sort of customer strategy. We're starting with ditch, which is an interesting one to start with, because so many people over the years have told me all customers are good customers. To be quite honest with you, that's absolute nonsense. I mean, the best decision I ever made in a business a long time ago that took us from a $750,000 loss into profit was by ditching our biggest customer. So why is it important to consider that? And I would advise you to do this at least on an annual basis, but also to think about continually reviewing. Because when we take on customers, we generally take them on for a reason, and it's probably a really good reason at the time. But as we go through and our business grows and develops, or maybe our focus changes a little, those customers may become less suitable for what we're doing. They may be the kind of customers who there's been a problem developed with. Maybe they are their credit worthiness has gone down the drain. Maybe it's something as, maybe the way in which we work, we've moved apart from each other. And maybe they're a simple customer that when the phone rings, everybody in the office dives for cover and goes, I'm not dealing with them. These are the sort of customers that we need to be thinking about, because unless you are making huge amounts of money from disruptive customers, they are costing you an awful lot more than you think. So that's taking existing customers, going through our existing customer base and thinking, right, who do we want to ditch? Who should we no longer be doing business with? So sticking with existing customers, I'm actually going to drop to the far end now and talk about maintain. So again, going through our existing customer list, who do we want to maintain? And by that, I mean customers with whom we already have as much business as we want, where we don't particularly want to grow and develop them, but we want to retain them as customers. So there'll be a little strategy that goes along with how do we maintain these customers. So we're on a certain level with them. And again, there could be a variety of reasons for that. One of which could be, they've reached their credit limit. Actually, we sell as much as we want to with them, or we already have all of their business. So they'll be maintains. We don't want to lose them, but we ain't going to grow with them. Drop to the middle, expand. So again, we're taking existing customers and we're stratifying them, and we're saying these are the customers we want to grow. And this is where it really ties in really nicely. You start to see how it works with the Ansoff Matrix. So on the expand side, what do we want to expand into with them? How do we want to expand them? But again, we list our existing customers that we want to expand with. Then we'll move on to the re-engage. So this is lapsed customers. I mean, we talk about, low-hanging fruit, as Kevin was talking about earlier. Lapsed customers, people with whom we've done business, but for some reason we are no longer doing business. So again, going through your lapsed customers, who do we want to re-engage with? They go on that list. So this is a series of simple lists with names on them. I'll show you how it works in a minute. And then we've got the acquire. So who do we want to be doing business with? And what I'm not talking about here, you could do it in a general amorphous way, but the real power of this tool is to name names. So really think about, who do I want to be doing business with? And they go in that list. So that's the first part of it. We look at our customers, we look who we want to be working with, and we stratify them in that way. So how do we take this from a targeting tool into a forecasting tool? Well, use some kind of, and I've set this up very simply in Excel. So we're listing each of the customers in each of these areas. And then what I want people to do is think, okay, so in the next 12 months, how much business do we think we will do with the re-engage, the expands, the attains, and the maintains? And how much business do we want to get rid of with the ditch? So once you've identified that, you can already start to see how, if you've gone through this process, you will have a tool that says, this is how much opportunity we have. These are our targets for the coming 12 months. So, and then you will put a strategy behind each of these 5 areas, because each one will be slightly different. So you've already got your forecast, if you like, as to what your turnover you want it to be in the next 12 months. And you do the same for year 2 and year 3. I think, sorry, 3 years, we're kind of limiting it to that, because it's about really trying to think this through and be as reasonably accurate as you can. So when you've completed this analysis of your existing and your target customers, and you've got your forecast here, what you can now start to see is, let's say you want £1 million worth of business in the next 12 months. You take off your ditches, add up all your others, and you can see if you've got £1.5 million in there, well, then you've got a really good group of companies to go for, opportunities to target, and you can really go out there and do it. If, for instance, that list only adds up to 750,000, well, then you've got to have a bit of a rethink. So it's about using this tool to really get into your customer base and really target the customers that you want to work with, and then use it to forecast going forwards. Everybody who knows me knows that I like to keep it simple. And this is a simple tool, but it actually has the ability to really help you focus, gain some direction, and give you some numbers to fire at as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Louise. So you've got a couple of really useful tools there. One's perhaps a bit more strategic in terms of the Ansoff Matrix, and sort of a bit more blue sky brainstorming type thinking. And then the Dream brings that right down to specifics and makes it a bit more tactical. So you're between those two, again, you're starting to do something that we talk about quite a lot, which is trying to bridge that strategy to tactics divide that we often have, or vision to tactics, strategy to tactics. So the two tools go very nicely together.